And the Texas Tribune released its poll results on the upcoming election early this morning. They released them around 4 a.m. Not only does it mention how Texans feel about the presidential election, but it also gives us some insight about some other big elections here in our state. So joining us this morning is Texas Tribune executive editor Ross Ramsey. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. So let's jump right into this, shall we? The results came down again, as we mentioned, 4 a.m. And of course, everybody wants to know about President Trump and Joe Biden. How do Texas feel?
We have the president 5 points ahead of former Vice President Biden, 50 to 45 in that race at the top. The Republicans are solidly with Donald Trump, and the Democrats are solidly with Joe Biden. There's not really a big independent vote here, but the independent vote in Texas normally leans to Republicans. This time it leads to Democrats. One other thing here is that there's a really big gender gap. Women favor Biden by 5 points, men favor Trump by 16 points.
Now, Ross, a lot went into this poll: the economy, COVID-19, race relations, but Joe Biden is doing better with the independents in the Lone Star State. Do you think that could hurt the president?
It depends on how the race closes. You know, there's not a ton of independent voters, and as I said, the Republican and Democratic voters are pretty well polarized. But the independents could swing it, and if they close toward Trump, that could spell the difference. When you've got an election like this, you know, they say this every time, but it really is important this time. Turnout really determines what's going to happen. Which side turns out their voters? We know what their voters will do if they show up. The question is whether they show up.
That is a big question. Now let's turn now to another big race here in Texas, the U.S. Senate race between John Cornyn and M.J. Hagar. Senator Cornyn leads Hagar by 8 points, but she has said before that she expects to poll lower right now, right?
She does. She's got a disadvantage in that she's never held office. She's not as well known. She's never run statewide. When we ask people what's your impression of these two candidates, 43% of the voters say they still don't have an impression of M.J. Hagar. She's got very few weeks here to close that gap, but she can introduce herself. She does so successfully. If Cornyn doesn't keep up with her, she could close this gap here.
Well, he's not on the ballot this year, but he's always in the headlines. Senator Ted Cruz. Texans always have an opinion on him. So how do they feel about his job performance?
You know, he's pretty flat. And by flat, I mean he's got about as many people thinking favorably as unfavorably. He's very well known because he ran for president. He ran for, you know, he's a little bit different from Cornyn. Cornyn still, after all of these years, still has some people who don't have a real impression of him. They're kind of neutral about him. Cruz, you're either for him or against him. And, you know, those numbers have persisted.
And, you know, the last topic on our agenda today, Governor Greg Abbott. He's had a really busy year. He's popular here in Texas, but his latest report card took a little bit of a dip. So why do you feel that is?
Well, you know, he is the face of the response from the state government to the coronavirus. And when people are happy with that, he does pretty well. In April, at the very beginning of the government's response, the difference between people who liked Greg Abbott and people who didn't like Greg Abbott was 24 points in his favor. As the summer has gone by and we've gone into autumn, people have gotten a little frustrated, from bar owners to hair salon owners, and that gap has closed from 24 points to 7 points. So the governor is still popular, but he's lost a lot of steam on this coronavirus.
Understandably so. Okay, Ross Ramsey, thank you so much for waking up early and joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Good morning.